So, welcome everyone to Essentials in Practical Alchemy. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist. You'll find me online. Welcome, Internet. And so today is our 7th class of instruction. And so, as such, we're going to talk about the lucky number 7 and all of its esoteric correspondences, which are many. It covers a whole plethora of information. But before we can get to that, we're going to talk about what I term as a cognitive thought form. And this is different. I need to buy new pens. This relates to a symbol or symbolism, but are not necessarily the same. Okay, so what we're going to talk about first, and class participation is welcome. When I talk about a symbol, what do you guys think of? Any symbol in particular, what's a symbol to you? You can be as basic or as technical. A logo can be a symbol, right? So, and this actually comes from the Greek logos, so, which means mind or mindset. So the logo tells you what the person is doing with their company or thinking. What else? What other things are symbolic?
Glyphs.
Glyphs, okay. So glyphs would fall next to logos, right? So let's make it simpler. For instance, a star can be used as a symbol. A cup can be used as a symbol, right? A sword can be used as a symbol, correct? Now the question is, of course, what does that mean? Well, a symbol is something that is used to explain an abstraction. In other words, that you have an idea of something, and then you want to represent that materially. Kabbalistically, what you're doing is you're drawing from what is known as the sphere of Netzik, and you're using elements from the sphere of Hod, which is the rational mind, to define what you intuitively understand, and then frame it in some kind of framework. So every statue that you see, for instance, the Buddhist statues, the Nordic statues, the Grecian statues, the Egyptian statues, each of those contain within them symbols, but because they are multiple layers of symbols, they become a cognitive thought form. Okay? So the difference then is a symbol might be a singular object with a singular purpose. For instance, a star on a police officer represents their power, right? It's their authority that's given to them. If you see a star on an officer's uniform, you know the man is a general, right? And we can talk about the different kinds of stars. In fact, we'll do that right now. Typically, in the esoteric, you have 2 forms of stars, right? You have a 5-pointed star, and then we also have a 6-pointed star. And we've spent a lot of time talking about this particular star, because this star actually conceals within itself a cube. Okay? So this is a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional object. This star is not. And this star comes in 2 separate forms. You have this particular one here, and then you have it like this. And traditionally in the world, this one is the oogity boogity one, right? And this one here is the okay one. And this is perpetuated as a result of 20th century Gardnerian Wicca. Okay? Gerald Gardner in the 20th century, and he was part of the Golden Dawn, had organized himself a group of people, a collective, to pursue a tradition which he had labeled as a renewal of an older tradition, right? And he drew upon all sorts of English root stuff, including Celtic and religious observance. This symbol here, and if you watch the movie Oh man, it's Tom Hanks. He's the symbologist in it.
Da Vinci's Demon? Angels and Demons?
The Da Vinci Code, right? At the beginning, he points out that this symbol is a representation of the sacred feminine. Okay? But how would we know that? And then, of course, what does this symbol leave us with? This symbol here is traditionally associated with things which are infernal and dark and horrible. Has nothing to do with anything that's real. Okay? In fact, where this symbol represents a sacred feminine, this one represents the sacred masculine. This symbol is awarded to you if you perform duties in the military which are exceeding all human possible composition. And you get Congressional Medal of Honor, okay? Where it's an act of Congress and they award it to you. And this symbol, an inverted pentagram, okay, because the chain holds it from the two uppermost points, is then awarded to you on a blue ribbon with white stars, okay? And each one of those things then represent a total cognitive thought form. The blue ribbon ties itself to the consciousness thought form of combat and conflict relative to the new God, the star in the heavens, and the blue sky it creates, which blots out the heavens, right? So every time the sun rises, this star competes against every other star in the available vicinity and wins, because it's all you get to see. It's the sun, and then it goes down, and then you get to see the truth. The truth is that there's a lot more stars in the universe than just one. But then it comes back up and we're all deceived. This is the father of lies. Get it? That's why this is known as Lucifer in the esoteric communities. Our sun is Lucifer. It is the bearer of light and darkness. Makes a lot of sense when you do that. This symbol here, Kabbalistically, is in opposition to this one. This is Mars, and this is Venus. Get it? Sacred feminine, sacred masculine. So if I want to award someone something in recognition of their duty in combat, I look to Mars. And I say, you have performed a Martian duty, right? You've been awesome. And there it is. This also then ties, you'll notice, you'll often see it depicted with a goat's head over it. This is in a representation then of Capricorn. And Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So line of custody moving you all the way down, you literally have the pillar of severity right here under the inverted pentagram. On the other side, you have the pillar of mercy, and it descends underneath Jupiter and Chesed. We've talked about this at length before. So these two symbols gain a whole lot more potency when you recognize that there's a purpose, and neither one is particularly good or bad. They're just tools to put in your alchemical toolbox, because there may be times when you need to address personal conflict. So the energy that you want to pull on may not necessarily be the energy from the sacred feminine. You might want to throw some power in there, get some punch into whatever you're working upon as a consciousness act, and draw upon this energy. So there's just one thing that we have looked at, and that's just stars. What other symbols can you think of that you regularly see yourselves shown daily? I think sometimes the reason why it's hard to come up with one is because we are surrounded by symbols to such a great extent we're blind to it. We're literally sense blind to it. And so we don't recognize that this tool right here, this is a perfect example of a complete cognitive thought form. It's made, the base metal is copper. This is associated with the goddess and Venus. You have a top-pointed orientated star, which again, 5-pointed star, another representative of Venus, and you have 3 of them. So then you have your representation of the maiden, mother, and crone, all contained within a singular cup. If you continue on with this cup also represents a force point in electromagnetism. And if you go online, under experimentations in the electric universe, in the playlist section, you'll find a section called primer fields, where they deal with magnetized cups and they drive plasma through it. And it creates a wide variety of electromagnetic interactions which are repeatable in nature. And so this then becomes electromagnetically, this would then be the constriction ring at the base of the tree, and the flip ring on either side, which then has the eruption of roots here, and then this is the eruption of a tree mass at the top, or a bush, right? And so this is the containment dome. This is important to know just because our ancestors understood these principles. They understood the functionality of these tools, and by understanding what you've got in your hands, you can then apply it and use it to great effect, okay? So, lucky number 7. Let's take a look at that really quick. What are some associations that you can immediately think of when you think of the number 7?
Correct.
Days of the week. We have 7 days of the week. What else?
7 sisters in the Pleiades.
Okay. I'm going to leave that one there, but yes, there are 7 sisters in the Pleiades.
On the constellations.
Yes, in the constellation, the most evident stars, there are 7. How about this? 7 chakras. Right? 7 colors in the visible spectrum. And the colors are red, orange, yellow. Let's see what else I got here. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and purple. Just so that you know, I want to make sure you guys have that. In terms of musical notes, we have 7 natural notes. Seven natural notes. When you take the number 7, I pointed this out before, in astrology, on the 22nd day of every month, you have a new zodiac sign. It's the turning point in the zodiac every month. 22 over 7 gives you 3.141582769. I can't remember. I used to remember pi down to 7 digits, but anyway. So it's pi. Pi is a description of a circle. Okay? So now you have a cycle. A cycle based on this numerological construct, which also we learned in oceanography that if the wave height is 1 over 7 times its wavelength, the wave will crest and break, giving you a new wake or a new week. Get it? So this is a wave height, this function of waves, and that's 1 over 7. This is part of the structure of the universe, and this is not stuff that we're making up to force it into a box. This is language that we've used to describe something that we're experiencing every day. Color and sound. 7 and 7. And that has an impact on you energetically from top to bottom in your bodies. Okay? So 7 has some pretty remarkable things. In terms of the Kabbalah, and in the tarot, this is the Tree of Life. I so need new pens, Gene. Alright, yep, when you're dying. Okay, so this is the Tree of Life. Kether at top, number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I almost feel like I'm on Sesame Street, right? Where they like count down, I was like, 7! And it's really big. Okay, sorry, it's been a long day. Anyway, so, and 10. This section here is what is known as Netzek, which means victory. In this, you have a tie between Venus and Mars by association of a victorious conflict. Okay? However, Venus engages in her conflict a bit differently than Mars does. Her engagement usually has to do with partnerships. So when you see our society being driven by emerging social contract, in other words, this is what is appropriate now in society, and therefore we won't treat people in a certain way, okay? That falls under the domain of Venus. Her political tools are tools of social crafting. So equality in marriage would fall under this, as well as any kind of racial or gender neutral associations. In other words, where it's a baseline equality. Not same, but equal. There's the difference. Venus looks for the equality because she looks for a flow and partnership. She also, in this context under Netzach, represents pure instinct. And if you want to engage in any kind of observance and draw upon these particular energies, the observance is always done in an art form. So that can be music, song, poetry or writing, any kind of sketching, any kind of storytelling. But typically this is the method in which you observe Venus and draw upon this energy and this power. The reason for this is because the energies here cannot be visualized. They can only be felt. They can only be intuited. You feel your way around it. The tools we use come from this side over here, number 8, and we'll talk about 8 next week. But for the moment, 8 is Hod, and it runs under mercurial influences. Okay? And this is, esoterically, this is the form side of magical construction. Okay? And this is the force. So this side here provides structure whereby this side here may initiate its active purpose. So what happens is over the millennia, as our ancestors had worked to comprehend and quantify and understand various expressions of consciousness, and by doing this, for instance, they would look at your dog and they would look at how your dog is, look at how your dog interprets life, what your dog enjoys. Our ancestors, I am absolutely convinced, they looked upon animal consciousness as an expression of the all, as something to understand, that this was yet another aspect of that in which we reside. And so by understanding different animals, we could understand the universe better. I know for a fact, having lots and lots of animals in my house, I own a snake, a parrot, and dogs, and cats and rats, and all sorts of stuff. You can learn a vast amount by simply looking at your animal and going, tell me about yourself. Tell me what it is that drives you, and just meditating upon that, studying it. Recognizing, for instance, that even the form of the animal itself can be an expression of that consciousness platform, okay? So we talked about, for instance, why dogs are associated with the sun and with sex drive, okay? The Romans looked at dogs and with a sense of, I think, blithe humor, recognized that certain dogs in an aspect of dominating each other will hump each other, right? This is a dominance act. But we as humans interpret that as a sex act. So every act of dominance that a dog engages in is actually interpreted by us as an expression of sexual energy or potency. So when you see dogs represented mythologically in association with certain characters or events, you're recognizing that potency, that bestial urge that pushes you forward, okay? That is a complex idea, and that's the foundation of what cognitive thought form is. Does that make sense? Okay. So, let's see what else we got going on here. All right. So, when we go gambling, people always talk about Lady Luck. Who then would Lady Luck be?
Venus.
Yes, yes, exactly. So Lady Luck equals Venus. All right, now, what you just did was exercise the second principle of alchemy, which is correspondence. And I've been trying to get correspondence. And As we've been teaching and working through this together over the last 7 classes, you've noticed I've brought you through several links of logic or understanding, right? So that this is this, is this, is this. This idea here, wow, we're going to switch colors. This idea here, oh, so much better. The principle of correspondence gives you the necessary tools that you can then use to decrypt everything else. Ultimately, the other 7 that you want to learn and become familiar with are the 7 planets in our standard astrology, which would be the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and the Moon. We're on the Earth, so it's all relative there. And then we have Mars, and Jupiter, and Saturn. Those 7 spheres also correspond to you physically, and they tie to music, and they tie to color, and they tie to the days of the week, right? Because we talked about each day of the week corresponds to each one of these planetary influences, and they're all made manifest in reference. Now the question you have to ask yourself is why? Why today in the modern age are we embedding all of this heavy-laden symbolic stuff and not teaching people about its own significance? Why would you think that would be the case? Any ideas? Is there any kind of benefit in knowing or understanding this?
Yeah, things are going on in your life, you can look at what's happening in the world around and pull the correlations.
Yeah, you can do that. I think the power that resides here, because this is something that is this knowledge is practiced and kept to an exclusive group, and then all the rest of us get to basically blindly participate and reinforce it. It's because we're fulfilling the role of an audience. We are the witnesses. Witnesses do not have to understand what they're witnessing. They just, in an active consciousness, they simply have to see it. The director and the actors are the ones that typically need to know what's going on, and the actors, not always. Okay? A lot of times it's just the director that needs to know. So, let's go back to cognitive thought forms for a moment. If you want to create your own cognitive thought form, what do you think would be the first point at which you want to start? The symbol. But before the symbol, you want to define your purpose. Right? You want to actually have a purpose for the cognitive thought form. The cognitive thought form is designed to be an expression of something that you feel exists, or something that you want to bring into existence. And by that I mean that the expression of your consciousness is not separate from the consciousness that you are sensing out there. It's part of the same system. So the purpose is the first thing that you want. The second then is you want to itemize a series of symbols which will help you express that idea. And the point of the symbol is to give you the language necessary to utilize that expression. You had mentioned earlier, we had talked about, and I'll go ahead and share this with the wood, okay? We were talking about wood, and I had mentioned in the Vampires and Werewolves class of how wood functions as a cognitive thought form based on your understanding of it. And specifically, it's because wood represents consciousness that's been made physical, tangible, in carbon, okay? And the process by which that works is, we've defined that consciousness is electromagnetism. So all things which are electromagnetic are participant in consciousness. specifically, so your thoughts, which are electromagnetic, right? Electrons moving between neurons, stimulating chemical reactions, and we interpret that as thinking, or emotions, or feelings. That active consciousness, yes? Oh, no, okay. Yeah, that active consciousness then is not dissimilar from anything that is structured or built upon it, okay? In the case of wood, the sunlight, and light is electricity, it's electromagnetism, stimulates growth on the planet, causes trees to grow, the trees absorb that and convert that light into cellulite. That now becomes a physical example of sunlight. Like it's light, now it's wood, and you take the wood, you stake a vampire, and now the vampire has been impaled with a representation of consciousness, right? From sun to wood to you to vampire. The idea of a cross being a function of consciousness, this is a twofold symbol. The cross itself represents a box which has been folded out, okay? And it represents an intersection between that which is spirit and that which is material. At this point here, you have atonement, which means at one thought. It's a one conscious point. So this is the intersection. This is what all savior figures seek to achieve, right? The unification between the spirit and the material. Recognizing that in truth, what we see as material and what we see as spirit are truly the same thing, simply a manifestation on different points of the line. Okay? So, with regard to, let's see. Back up just for a moment. With regard to this, now and let's see, I itemize to purpose. Are you guys following me? Are we all up to, keeping up here? Okay, because I'd like to move towards the tarot at this point and give you kind of a corresponding relationship between certain well-known symbols and their associated properties. The reason I wanted to hit wood was because I want to move into wands, and wands are a representation of wood, and the aspect of burning is an aspect of consciousness. So before I move too far or too fast, I want to make sure we're all caught up. We're all good? Okay, so let's take a look then at a really complex cognitive thought form, which would be the tarot. Okay? As an example of breaking up the four apparent or gross material elements. Okay? So we have wands, and wands are fire. And I have a weird fire spelling there. And wands are wood, right? Okay, then we have, after wands, cups. And this is water. Okay. After cups, we have swords. And this is air. Following that, we have pentacles, or coins. And this is earth. These, in descending order, follow the tree of life as you move down. So when you're at the very, very top under Kether, and that's that point number 1, this is the first emanation of fire in the tree of life. Boom, manifests. After that, Saturn is tied to water. Okay? And so Saturn fulfills, and if I do it like this so you guys can see it. There would be a line right there, and this would be fire. And another line, water, air, there we go, air, and then the last one down there is earth. Okay? This is your astral world, And this one here, this is again number 7, Netzig, number 8, Hod, and number 9, Yesod, which is the moon. This is where all your psychic stuff goes on relative to us. It's the domain of consciousness just above our terrestrial realm. So if you're raising your vibrations, lifting things up, you're trying to push your mind up into this area. Okay? So let's talk about raising vibrations really quick here. Seven chakra points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to bounce around here so that you can see it all tying together. Everything is part of everything else. Each one of these concepts are describing it from a different point of view. It's very much like that whole parable of the 3 guys, who are blind walking around an elephant, and one grabs its leg and says it's a tree trunk, one grabs its tail and says, oh no, it's a rope, and the other one grabs its nose and says it's a vacuum cleaner. You know, they're all right and they're all absolutely wrong. The best way I've found to teach this stuff is simply by addressing it and hitting it from as many different sides as I can so you can kind of see Mount Everest. You know, this is a big topic. So at the base here is your root. And this is red, and you're going to see the colors and everything coming together. This is your sacral, and this is orange. This is your solar plexus. Man, these lights are hot. I'm like cooking under that one.
You want me to turn on the air?
Oh, would you please? That'd be awesome. I'm like baking. This is yellow. The heart is green. Throat is blue. And this is third eye. Indigo. And this is your crown. Purple. From this, you can get a whole bunch of information as how our society is organized and stuff. For instance, when royalty is crowned, what color do they wear? Purple. Okay? And this purple association actually has to do with something else, which would be the dawn of creation and the aspect of how our world used to be, apparently. When you have a brown dwarf, I'm not going to write that down, but brown dwarfs emit a orange-brown light. The complementary opposite of orange is purple. So if that star is, just as our yellow star is blazing yellow and creating a blue sky for us, because the complementary opposite of yellow is blue, so too if you have an orange-brown star, or a reddish star, then that light will be, the brown dwarf would then produce a purplish sky. You're going to find references to the purple dawn of creation when you work in the field of plasma physics and mythology. And there's a lot of references there. I have lots of lecture material under the Electric Universe section of the website that discusses that. These are actual scientists who get up and are giving us an idea of what a proto-Saturn solar system would have looked like, where what would have been like Saturn was a different planet. Okay, let's take a look at this. So if you want to raise your energy centers, first off, our heart right now is powered by green energy. In other words, that if you want to align your chakras and get yourself centered, visualize where each of these colors are in relation to your body and then land it. Myself, I've always found that it's easiest just to pick one chakra and dial in on that one because everything else kind of syncs up after that. So if you focus on your heart or maybe your solar plexus, then the other stuff just kind of lines up after that. Our current star is yellow, however. So what is this telling you here about the heart and the star? Is it possible that we might need to switch it up a little bit? Here's my thought, and this is my personal hypothesis. I believe that we are externally driven. In other words, that electrically, we are so dependent on our environment that we are intractably inseparable from it. If the sun went out, we would go out with it. And I believe that simply by virtue of the fact that there's evidence in our historical record that says that this has happened, and it was the result of a lot of extinctions. Okay? If you have, for instance, our planet has a fossil record of dinosaurs which cannot possibly exist in today's world, simply by virtue of the fact that the planet's gravity is 1/3 more intense than it was back in the day. This means that the world has changed, that something shifted. Okay? We have a record that says there are animals that were fine for a long, long time, and yet now they can't live. So what happened? We have 5 major extinction events that hit this planet, 5 of them. And the descriptions, based on the fossil record given to us by our mainstream scientists, is inadequate to describe the causal forces behind that. They try to do comet impacts, except for the fact that the comet impact largely would be insufficient most often. The Earth tends to regulate itself rather rapidly. It has also a bunch of safeguards that would absorb that kind of energy and then reprocess it to the environment rapidly. On the other hand, if you switch out the lights, turn out this star, and you switch it back on with a different star, any creature that couldn't deal with that new electromagnetic influence, that new heightened intensity, would die. From what I have seen, as I've explored this idea, it seems apparent that things would just simply fall asleep and never rise again, which might explain why you have these massive finds of bones in these valleys where it's like, why did they all just pile up in Montana here? What's going on? There are thousands and thousands of dinosaurs here. And the idea of some graveyard of the dinosaurs is just absolutely ridiculous. It's far easier to just say, things just simply switched out. And why would that happen? Because maybe the power source switched. Part of what brought me to this was thinking about Superman. Superman is an example in my mind of a failed alchemist. He's clad in colors that are part of the prima materia of alchemy, which is red, blue, and yellow. Okay? He's a representative of both Jupiter and Mars. Mars through his red clothing, and if you look at the classical Superman, he's clad with red boots, red gloves, or sometimes his hands are free. He's got his red shorts on, right, and his red cape or his mantle. This gives him degrees of authority. His feet are walking in he stands for combat. And if you follow Superman, every time he addresses a problem, it's with his fists first, and then something else. Batman, on the other hand, addresses his problems with his brains first, because he's not invulnerable. It's like looking at Saturn, and it's like looking at Jupiter trying to resolve something, except for Superman's more than just Jupiter. He represents what I call a Horus archetype, where he has cross-functionality between both pillars. All right? The blue represents Jupiter, his ability to function under Jupiter's influence, Kabbalistically. So Superman, however, his chest plate is gold. And the idea is that he should be bringing his energy in sync with the sun, and that is in fact what he does. Superman synchronizes his energy with the output of the sun, and as a result, he has command over all forms of consciousness. He's invulnerable, he can fly, he can move really fast, he can jump really high, he can lift anything he wants. Basically, there's no physical impairment. He is Superman. So Nietzsche would have looked at Superman and said he was a fully actualized human being, right? He's somebody who's absolutely got it under control and is not subject to the caprice of this world. The problem is that Superman has a vulnerability, and his vulnerability comes from his origin point. The reason why I'm pointing all this out is because this relates to our own story. He's an archetype of us, and he's an archetype of what we need to do in order to switch it up a little bit more. In the case of Superman, his heart, there it is. So his heart, he's actually switched it up one notch so that the yellow of his solar plexus is driving his heart energy. Okay? This then pushes him up so that his crown is indigo, and he's an indigo child. That's why he's all blue. That's his skin color, just like Krishna, right? He's an indigo child. So that means that he's perfectly adapted to function under this star. His heart is driven by yellow energy. And that's why the Nolan Superman is just all blue. He just made him a complete indigo child. And he's got the red boots and the red cape. If you look very carefully, the S of the Superman is a stylized dragon. And that's a very complex cognitive thought form relating to his power. Now, any of you watch Orange is the New Black on Netflix? Why would orange be considered the new black? This is an interesting idiom that would be phrased. But just offhand, why would you think? Knowing what you know about the esoteric stuff and knowing that orange relates to the sacral chakra, and understanding that Saturn was a brown dwarf, which gave it a reddish-orange hue, and our current sun is yellow, and black is associated with Saturn, why would orange be the new black? And keep in mind also that black is associated with fashion Saturn, right? So the new black is the new fashion-savvy item to be wearing. It's a double entendre, but keep in mind the Saturnian influence. So orange being the new black would be a person who switched it up 2 levels. So their purple crown chakra is now pushing out into the etheric realms, okay, which go off into creation. The Ein Sof hour, which is that point of creation where everything is distilling, and the prior point before manifesting into Kepha, okay, the point at which everything begins to distill here. Your crown, and let's see, your third eye switches up to blue. Let's see, no, I'm sorry. By switching it up 2 points, let's see, 1, 2, 3, your third eye is green. Why would green be important as a third eye color? It's the color of alchemical transformation of your willpower. Why is our money green? For the same reason. Money represents, American money as apple green represents an alchemical principle. It's how to affect change materially by using your vision. What are you going to spend your money on? What do you visualize would be a good investment? Where do you want to put your power? And so by dumping that green energy in, using this as what you visualize, that's tied to it. What benefits when you move your chakra points up 2 places like this so that your solar plexus is running on orange? Is an understanding that the root chakra deals with your base survival needs. This means that you've evolved past worrying about your base survival needs. This now blankets and it rolls back around to higher thinking. So your base survival needs, because it's like a loop, right? So this now pushes down to here and it's all pushing back up. Those needs now might extend into the community. They might extend into an enlightened sense of self-interest. So that if I take care of more people, it will take care of me, and therefore the network is established. Your generative function is in the sacral area, in orange. This is that reproductive energy that we talked about with the dog, right? This is a way of asserting your dominance in the universe around you, but it asserts it in a way so that now that you've pushed it up, it's in the heart zone, which is about love, right? So it purifies that element, right? It washes it clean. And of course, as you move the yellow up, this yellow moves up into the throat. So that means your speech now is love-oriented, right? No evil speaking of people, because you've elevated this energy point. So what you create now, the words which you create, the words which you speak, which are an active creation. Every time we talk to someone, every time we engage in a story, we're creating new consciousness in the recipient, in our audience. Imagine what the world would be like if that new consciousness that we vocalize, that we create, which we know is associated, sound is part of the creative process, right? There's vision with the visual spectrum, and then there's sound. This is depicted, by the way, beautifully. Can you hand me Shiva right there? This one? Yes, that's perfect. Shiva here, one of my favorite people, super dancer. Just in case you ever want to meditate while dancing, focus on Shiva. Shiva's a super dancer. Shiva bears in both hands implements of creation and destruction. In his left hand he holds a flame, right, which is both creative and destructive, okay? And in his right hand he has the Damaru, it's the strum that he actually pawned off of this little brown dwarf that he's standing on. And if you follow his story, one of the many different kind of stories, when he's challenged by this small brown dwarf person, it becomes clear that the story that we're telling here is Shiva is the sun, and this is Saturn that he's standing on. And he's standing on it with his right foot because this is the foundation upon which creation is built, under the pillar of severity under Saturn, providing all that concrete structure. Remember, on the right side, I said it was Hod that defines what Netzach can do intuitively, right? It gives it its structure. So when you see a statue standing on its right foot, it shows an observance of that structure. His flexibility here, the left foot rising, means that the activity then will move forward, right? There's constantly flow. His hands, this is a stop motion, and in the Orient, this means come here, right? This is an active, this is more polite. In the West, we go like this, which is very rude. If you go over to Korea or something, you go, hey, come here, they'll be like really pissed off at you. You don't do that. Come here, like this. So this is come, and stop, in two forms of creation, sound and light. Electromagnetism and plasma, and sound, chiasms. So Shiva is a scientific diagram, and it's not a funny wonder that right in front of CERN is a giant sea of Shiva statue. Because they still believe this stuff. They don't get down and worship this stuff, they understand it for what it represents. A cognitive thought form, which is descriptive language and visual terms of how the universe is operating. It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. Every part of this, all the little flames around the outside, the fact that it's shaped as it is in a teardrop, not unfamiliar to the Egyptian Ankh, right? Also a teardrop, which would have a descent and an intersection, except for in this case, it's on a lotus flower. So, thank you. All right. So, you kind of getting what this switching up business is? This is kind of a light brushing over, but this number 7 keeps emerging over and over and over again, and the reason for it is because it's part of us. It's part of the functionality, it's part of what we do, and it's some weird structure of the universe that's delightful. There's more that we can go on music theory. I love music theory, but we won't go into that today. So, any questions so far at all? Yes? No? Yes? No? Okay. All right. So when you're meditating and you want to switch it up, you can do the Superman thing and bring your yellow right here to your heart, okay? Or you can be a super duper man and pull it up here to your throat, okay? And this is what your Christ archetypes do, okay? This is your Buddhas, your Krishnas, your Jesus, your Mohammeds. The speech to which they give becomes creative as a force of love, okay? It becomes an expression of the greater force of the universe. And so, all right, last thing. Let's see. This is leading us into next week. Now, we walked through the body in terms of the 7 chakras, right? Because next week we're going to go into the eternal cycle, but I need to warm you up for the eternal cycle this week. So right here we have a very lopsided planet Earth. Let's try that again. Do you know, I forget the name of the artist, but there was actually Pope Benedict I. He challenged an artist to prove his worth, and so the artist presented him with a perfectly drawn circle, and he did it freehand. And I wish I could remember the full story, but I'm not that artist, apparently. All right, so our planet Earth has 3 particular zones of note that relate to astrology. At 23.5 degrees, both north and south. And you might remember the number 23, do you recall the significance of the number 23? The 23rd letter of the alphabet is W. And we drew an association with W by showing that W was actually a double V. Okay? And then we, over time, and this is a brief review, we then demonstrated that the double V represents the seal of Saturn, right there. So, do a little dink, dink, and down here, little circles, and there you go. And for those of you who are new, there are some videos that go into depth about describing this relating to sacred geometry. So this seal is a esoteric symbol which then ties us back together, and a large number of corporate logos worldwide utilize that symbol in one form or another. My favorite, of course, that's Volkswagen right there. Right? You do the double V and then do the circle, right? You got Volkswagen. And there's any number of others that will do that. If you look on it, so 23, and of course the number 5 has its association to Saturn through the glyph. So it's a planet with weird numerological dual reference, Saturnian dual reference. So at 23.5 degrees, north and south, you have 2 tropics. This one here is the Tropic of Capricorn, and this one up here is the Tropic of Cancer. Before we go too far, I want to talk about that word, Cancer. When we hear that word, most of us are like, ew, right? Because what do we think about? Cancer! But not like me. I'm a Cancer. I was born in July. No, you think about some weird cellular growth that's killing someone, right? You think about, in fact, biologically speaking, in accurate clinical terms, cancer is defined as unrestrained cellular growth to the detriment of the originating organism, right? So basically you're getting eaten by yourself. The cells which should be supporting you are now destroying you. Cancer is also the zodiac sign, so that if we do the year, and we start here, and we do a little sine wave like this, and then we come down, and we go back up. Cancer represents June 21st, which is that turn point into the summer, right? Okay. Why would our ancestors define this as Cancer? Why would they pick the hottest point of the year when the most light is visible and describe it as Cancer? Because of its effect on the environment. I believe, based on my research, mythologically the Golden Age was one in which the planet itself was self-sustained to the point where there was no detriment to any of the organisms. Not unlike what you see within the fetus within a womb of a woman. The entire system, it's pretty wild actually. The baby, when the baby's growing up and he's got the little umbilical going in there and the kid's all like, yay, I'm in here, this is super. I love being inside a mom. Most of you don't realize that it's actually pretty nasty inside there. The amniotic fluid is actually produced by the baby urinating. So it's, and then throughout the course, throughout the 9 months as the baby's developing, it defecates inside of the bag, and then it eats that stuff to develop the muscles in its throat, and then it defecates again, and then it eats it again, and it defecates, and it drinks the pee. Nothing hurts the baby, because the whole system is designed to sustain the child. It sounds gross to us, because we look out in the world and we see that that's not possible. And yet within the womb, it's entirely possible. Now take that as a microcosm and expand that idea in planetary terms, where you have a mother star, which then gives birth to a series of satellites around it. Each one of those satellites would be adapted to the energetic output of this star, 100%. There would be no reason why anyone would ever get a sunburn. right? Because you would evolve to the electromagnetic output of this star. The fact that everything eats us and everything hurts us and light itself burns us on this planet is clue enough that we're not from this environment originally. That whatever we evolved in or under, it was a circumstance different than it is today, just like dinosaurs with a fossil record, which can't possibly walk around today in Jurassic Park, in Jurassic World. The truth of it is they walked around just fine millions of years ago. Now they can't. The planet's changed. The environment is fundamentally altered. We don't talk about that in regular science because we've been fed this long-standing myth that the solar system gradually came to predators, a process of accretion, and slowly over millennia and millions of years, all this stuff happened. And yet our historical record and everything about our planet reveals that it's cataclysmic, that this stuff happens quick, it happens suddenly, and it rectifies itself in a hurry. And then we go on, and then we tell ourselves stories. But every possible story that we tell ourselves today is a retelling of that horrible story. All the words of the gods, everything. It's a retelling of these celestial dynamics where everything was switching up. And that includes the Bible. The Bible is awesome for this stuff when you go through and read it. What I'm describing is what's called astrotheology. So, and that's the source material for all of this. All of these gods have a secret face. And the secret face is one of those 7 planetary bodies. And my best example for this, you ever watch those Eddie Murphy movies? You know, where the clumps. That's a great example. Eddie Murphy plays everyone, right? He plays all of the different fat clumps. The little boy clump, and the mama clumps, and the grandma clumps, and he's all in there in the same thing.
There you go. You better cover your plate. Oh, grandma. Mama, have some water. It's been all night.
Don't tell me I'll cover your plate. Don't, not tonight, Cletus. I'll kick
As
your
an
ass.
excellent example of watching a celestial deity hop in and out of other forms that we use to describe them, but it's really the same God, right? So it's Jupiter, but it's also Zeus, but it's also Odin, okay? Or it's Osiris, but it's also Isis, or it's Hera, and it's also Zeus. You know, these planetary bodies where the husband-wives are unproductive unions. That's because the feminine aspect is the North Polar region, and the masculine aspect is the South Polar region. And how do we know that? Because our bodies are our template for the universe. So everything above the solar plexus absorbs. I hear and I eat sound. I smell and I eat smells, and my mouth eats and my eyes eat light, right? But everything down here below is projected. I produce children, I go to the bathroom, everything goes out. That's a masculine idea, masculine. Masculine aspect projects, feminine aspect absorbs, is passive receptive. So when you take it on a planetary level, the energy goes like this. Okay? Comes in like that, and goes out like this. Right? Okay. Similarly, the Tropic of Capricorn, this is over here, this is December 21st. So, Cancer, I want to go back to the Cancer idea. The idea of summer in Cancer, this is a descriptive of nature being at its wildest. And so they looked outside and they saw that the new consciousness was unrestrained. Aleister Crowley would say, "Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Because he opened his eyeballs and looked outside one day and said, wow, every possible rule I can think of is complete crap. There is no rules on this planet. People and things do what they want, and the only thing that stops anything from doing anything is punishment. Like the threat of violence, or some kind of, I'm going to die, if I'm an animal, I take the leap, should I do the leap from one tree branch to another? Or should I not? Literally everything makes these decisions consciously, and they're not evaluated on should or should not. They're evaluated based on the context of what they can do. So you do what you want, is basically what Crowley would say. Now, Crowley would amend that, and he would say love under will, or will under love, meaning that he recognizes that the dominant force that's still active as you elevate your chakras is going to be love. You want to do that. All right, so next week, I'm actually running out of time, you guys. So next week we're going to talk about this eternal cycle. And we're going to talk about the zodiac as it flows through this sine wave, okay? But this sine wave is created as a result of the sevens, as a result of all of those passages of seven. And so that's why we talked about the lucky number 7 today, and why 7 is just this amazing number. It relates to motion, it relates to the capacity to move through a stable system and create new activity. Perhaps, though, my favorite example of the number 7 relates to its usefulness in navigation within three-dimensional environments. It goes back to the Shotkana, or the Star of David, and the idea of this cube here in the center. If you take the cube by itself, to create a cube you need 6 points, and it doesn't matter where the 6 points are. These points then intersect, and that gives you your current location. Now if you want to move someplace, you need a 7th point. That's it. And that's what 7 is all about. It's about giving you direction. And ultimately, by identifying your direction under the number 7, that's where you find your victories. All right, thank you guys. It's been wonderful. We'll have class next week. It will be the last one that we're going to have here at the Druid Smith this year. And so it's been delightful talking to you and sharing all this stuff with you today. Have a great day.